interviewing the leading private equity executives and unlocking the secrets of success. Welcome to the Private Equity Podcast with Alex Rawlings.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Private Equity Podcast. Joining us today is Michael Tang, an experienced private equity-backed Chief Financial Officer. Welcome, and thank you very much for sharing your insights today, Michael.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate the time.
So, as is customary, Michael, if you could give us a 60 to 90-second breakdown of you, please.
Sure. No, sounds good. So I've spent my 20-plus career in the healthcare arena, obviously working for different healthcare verticals, and being really fortunate enough to work for PE-backed, Fortune 500 publicly traded, and even nonprofit integrated health systems throughout the United States, working in about 24 states so far. So really having the experience how to navigate different states, reimbursement structure, rate models, and really being able to give back to the community.
Excellent. So what one mistake do you see either private equity firms or portfolio companies making, and what actions would you suggest to correct them?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is not having an even balance between financial feasibility, client satisfaction, employee engagement, and quality clinical services. I think some PE-backed or some portfolio companies really focus more on the margin, so much that they, really you have the quality of services really be downgraded to a certain degree. And really, when that happens, you get a bad reputation in the community, and referral sources don't want to refer clients to you. So I think really having that even balance there is equally important. And I think one of the things that PE companies can do is really make sure that they focus on that balance, and that, counting paper clips and really driving margin is really a short-term impact. You need to focus on all four to really have the long-term impact, to really get that, to really increase enterprise value when they want to sell in 3 to 5 years, typically.
Okay. Makes sense. So Mike, with your background, heavily, obviously, healthcare services based, but also you've done a considerable amount of time in the kind of fast-growing and ever problematic as well behavioral healthcare arena, especially in the US. What are some of the trends that you're seeing being in that world happening at the moment?
Yeah, I think the top 2 or 3, one being a lot of consolidation now. I think, behavioral health was typically the redheaded stepchild in healthcare. People really didn't want to focus on it. But now you see a lot of different things on the news, obviously, a lot of it being negative, whether it be a school shooting or overdoses, and people want to focus more on it now. So, that one being the main concern, that, it deserves spotlight, obviously, within that healthcare arena. And, people do need help, and people shouldn't be ashamed if they want to reach out for help, whether they're going through depression or PTSD or some kind of substance abuse issue. And I think number 2, and it's a big problem, is really staffing, recruitment, and retention. I think specifically in the healthcare industry, it's a big issue right now, but in behavioral health, just because, we're not the highest reimbursed healthcare vertical. So we're really competing with Target, Walmart, construction, manufacturing places to really find people that really want to work and have a passion for this field. And finding a passion is really hard, because we don't want to just get a body just to fill a role, just because, staffing and salaries are 60 to 70% of our overhead already. So really finding the right person is really integral for our industry, especially in behavioral health.
Okay, interesting. And behavioral health we've done a fair few searches in the space, has had a bit of a negative connotation. You mentioned obviously within the ginger hair of the gingerhead of the healthcare services space, but how is that kind of changing? Because there was a lot of connotation with regards to the actual results that were it was kind of out the door, back in the door, 3 months later, not really solving challenges and solving problems. And, we've definitely seen an improvement from feedback that we've received from candidates, from private equity firms, from portfolio companies. what's your take on the kind of ever-facing changes that the industry needed to see in order to solidify itself better?
Yeah, I think the main one is going away from that true fee-for-service model and really getting to a value-based performance model or a fully capitated model. Obviously, every state is different. Some states are more behind on it. Some states are more ahead on it. But really, the managed care companies and the payers really making us focus on that instead of churning and burning clients. I think the focus on quality services and what KPIs should we use, whether it be 30-day readmissions in the hospitals, but it always comes back to how do you guys in behavioral health lower total cost of care? Because in ERs, 30 to 40% of people in ERs go there because of behavioral health concerns. So if you can figure out how to really force providers to focus on quality services, then you can lower that and then essentially lower how much payers are spending every year on things that they really don't have to spend on.
Interesting. And across your career as well, while working for these healthcare services, you mentioned a lot of consolidation, which is something you've been a major part of, Michael, during your career. Just give us just before we go into kind of the suggestions that you would suggest with regards to actual acquisitions and integration, just give us a bit of a flavor of some of the work that you've done with regards to M&A and the acquisitions that you've completed, please.
Yeah, no, sure. We have been, all the organizations I've been part of, very strategic. So we're not, just trying to acquire just to grow bigger and generate more revenue, more EBITDA. We want to make sure that it integrates well with the services we're providing now. And even location-wise, we want to make sure maybe it might not be a current geographic location that we serve now, but it's strategic that we're expanding in a new state and really taking a look at, is there a lot of competitors? Is there not a lot of competitors? Does it fit into our core client demographic base? Because, we can serve children, adolescent, adult, geriatric clients. And what do we really want to focus on? We want to make sure that we're not throwing all our eggs in so many baskets where, we're not an expert in one specific area. However, we want to make sure we have enough baskets that we can ride the wave, especially when COVID happened. I think I know of one of the only behavioral health companies that continue hitting financial metrics, that pivoted to telehealth instead of face-to-face. And really, we weren't that negatively impacted financially by that. And it's something that I'm proud of for this organization.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So if we look at a lot of the private equity firms I speak to, a lot of the requirements they put on their CFOs is M&A and integration experience. What's some of the advice that you would give from your experience of doing so many, Michael, that you would share with either portfolio or CEOs, CFOs, and obviously the private equity firms on some of the things that, this happened, and I would suggest that this might be a good idea for the future? What are some of the takeaways that you've had across your career and learning points?
Yeah, I think a couple of top 2 or 3 things. One really being, and it might sound like very easy and very blunt, like, okay, make sure you're doing the due diligence before you even decide to spend a couple $1 million or whatever your dollar amount is that you have allocated to spend on acquisitions. And that might sound easy, but making sure you dive into the income statement, balance sheet, making sure that you're doing testing on accounts receivables, making sure that you're really taking a deep dive into that. And don't always go for the big, home run in terms of the largest acquisition. Doing 5, 6, 7 small and pops are pretty much, equal to doing one large one. And sometimes it's better. Sometimes you get a quicker ROI on that, because when you're buying small mom and pops, you can buy it at a lower multiple. And also, their reputation and their quality of standard are higher on average compared to the big ones, because you have these people who started the organizations from the ground up. So they're putting their livelihood, their reputation online when they sell to a PE firm. And, they're not really experienced that much on, what kind of multiples should they sell for. Obviously, they, hire an investment bank to help them with that. However, we've seen we get a quicker ROI on smaller mom and pops than we do on these huge or even medium-sized acquisitions. In terms of your second part of the question, integration, I think that's very, very important to have a standardized action plan. post and pre-acquisition. So we have it standardized where every department has their normal checklist, what to do, what to look for, how long is it going to take to integrate, and making sure that, we tailor that to every acquisition, because everyone's not the same. But, having that standard template is, pretty good, because it helps us really align our focus, making sure that we don't go off course, making sure we don't miss anything when we do the integration, and we do it very systemically. So we don't want a mass exodus, right? Change is something that everyone does not like, and it's human nature. So making sure that we take our time when we integrate is very important, because people are our most important resource. And if, X amount of percentage of people leave, the asset's not going to be worth anything. So having that standardization is very important, especially during integration purposes.
Makes sense. And sorry to interrupt here. Just a quick note to highlight our new sponsor, Grata. The private equity market is rapidly shifting to a data-driven, proprietary deal sourcing standard. Grata provides the window into over 7 million middle market private companies. Contact Grata so you can access the market first. Request a demo at www.grata.com. Now back to the podcast. If we have a good due diligence process, which you would believe that private equity firms would, because that's their job to acquire, but it doesn't always happen as well, and mistakes get made. And we have a good integration process. Is there anything else that you suggest, maybe with some of the nuance areas, some of the softer skills requirements that are paramount to a successful M&A integration or M&A acquisition post-integration work? Is there anything else that maybe can't be standardized in documentation, or you think, do you know what, it's well worth doing this in the initial 5 days and getting together and doing all these kind of bits and pieces, which may be the standardized process? But is there anything there that's a bit more nuancy that isn't as simple as creating a form and following the process?
Yeah, I think people skills and developing that relationship before everything's finalized, I think that's something you can't really measure, but that should be number one on anyone's list, because people are always scared whenever you acquire them. Hey, am I going to have a job? What's the new company going to look like? Obviously, you're buying us because you want an ROI. What are the expectations? So, always we do a town hall after or right on that acquisition date specifically, and making sure that we answer everyone's questions and quell everyone's concerns, that everyone still has a job. But we don't want to lie as well, because PE firms, we're doing it for an ROI. Obviously, there's going to be economies of scale, usually on the shared services side, never on the direct clinical care side. So we don't want to lie as either. So we want to really be very careful of our wording whenever we do that, when we're answering questions that, we can't say every single person will have a job, but really making sure that we're answering their questions as honestly as possible, so that they know that we're transparent. We're not trying to hide anything. We don't have a hidden agenda. So that's the most important thing, to really start off on the right foot whenever you acquire a new company.
I know there's a lot of complexity when it comes to M&A due diligence and processes, and then post-integration. Last question on this, Michael. What's some of the things that you've seen that have gone wrong with regards to either M&A or the integration process? And what would you kind of highlight that was worth checking? And I'm sure it comes down to either nuance or obviously a process at due diligence phase, or it's a post-acquisition integration. But what's some of the things that you've seen go wrong, and what would you suggest now to correct those, or have done retrospectively?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Alex. I think one of them being, you can never ask too many questions or do too deep of a dive. And me to clarify that is, just because you ask for a very broad question, doesn't really make people tell you the truth all the time. So whenever you ask for backup or ask for testing or anything, no one should feel bad at that point, because all you're trying to do is making sure that you validate the answer that you get is right. And for you to ask for any kind of testing or backup for, a sample of, X percentage every month for the past 24 months, you're not calling anyone a liar. You're just making sure that you're covering your own ass that you make sure you're not missing anything. So we had scenarios where, in the beginning, we didn't do that type of a dive, and we trusted people on their word when they answered a question. And, it cost us a good material amount of money at the end because we have to go to lawsuits and make, like, oh, you didn't say us. Well, you didn't ask us this. So there's a back and forth and mediation. So you can never do too deep of a dive whenever you're spending a couple $1 million or, on any acquisition. In terms of the integration, I think really trust in people, your department heads, to lead that and not to micromanage, because, you're only one person. The CFO can't do everything. So you got to make sure that you trust your team, you trust their skill sets, all their strengths, and making sure that you're not micromanaging them, because, you want them to grow. You want them to go through this learning process with you, so that they can, move on in their career as well. So that being a main point, really to trust the people that you've hired in the company.
Sense. Thank you for sharing all of that. What 3 attributes do you believe make a top performer, Michael?
Yeah, I think joining any organization, especially PE ones, it's the same 3 for me. Number 1 being integrity. I think that whenever you say something, you have to follow through with it. Whether you promise or you say you're going to deliver a report by a certain time, you try your best to deliver that. And even when other examples, someone tells you something you can't repeat to anyone else, or they're a confidant in you, really make sure you don't break that trust. So that's my integrity is top 1. Number 2 is really communication, right? Is really listening and not hearing, and making sure that you're not the smartest person in the room, and you should never claim that title. You want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with really talented people who can support you in this process. And then the third one being ego. I think people are really sometimes too concentrated on titles or the money aspect, but you want to make sure that you're not too good to do something. Especially me, whenever I do due diligence, or if I need to do an ad hoc report, I can actually perform those by myself. And I do those to this day, because I don't want to be reliant on an analyst or someone else to do that for me, or if I feel I'm too good or to do something myself. And I think, those are the 3 things for me anyway, that makes a good leader, that will make you successful in any organization, whether it be PE-backed or not. But those are the 3 characteristics for me, Alex.
Perfect. I like all of them. It's difficult to disagree with any of them. So, and what do you, from working in a PE-backed environment, what do you love about the private equity industry, and equally, what do you dislike?
Yeah, I think the top thing I like is the speed and pace. I think all PE firms they keep saying, I want it tomorrow, or I want to sell it immediately. But I think everyone has realistic expectations. That's why everyone says, 3 to 5 years, or if you can do it sooner, yeah. But it's not as slow as, let's say, a nonprofit, where decision making is always, we got to get these people's feedback. We got to make sure that we're making the right decision. So I think speed and pace are something that I like personally, because I'm not bored. I want to it keeps me on my toes, so that I'm always prioritizing, making sure that what comes next needs to be prioritized first. I think something I don't like, some PE firms, like I said before, Alex, they don't have that balance between those 4 pillars that I discussed before. And I think they focus on margin so much that they're always quick enough to say, let's hire a consultant. All right, what can we do to get more blood from the rock? What other costs can we cut? What kind of admin do we don't need anymore? And I think not focusing on that too much, so much that really dilutes everything else. I think that's some PE firms, should learn from that. That's something I don't like, because you can get, there's a need there. As long as you have people to perform the service, you'll get the volumes, you'll get the referrals. But, focusing too much on, all right, how can we get more EBITDA? I think that's one of the things I don't like for some PE firms to really prioritize on.
Okay, yeah, growth and value creation, etc., is certainly more and more spoken about now, and has been over the last 5-10 years with private equity, rather than, I think what you're talking about there is that kind of financial engineering type process, rather than bringing actual value. What are your influences? What do you read? What do you watch? What do you listen? And what would you recommend that others check out, Michael?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I read is really, for me, industry articles or industry changes, whether it be reimbursements, staffing, anything that has an impact on, on the healthcare industry, just because I've been that's my main focus, and I don't think that will change for me. In terms of just personal reading, to be honest, Alex, I just finished my MBA last year in 2021 and just relocating for jobs and everything. So I haven't really had a time to do pleasure reading, especially with 2 kids at home. However, I think reading anything that has any kind of updates on the industry that you're working in is always important, because you want to keep up to date. You want to know what changes are coming down the pike to pre-plan for that. In terms of, just trying to relax and everything, I think even for you, just watching any kind of movies, whether it be action, comedy, or anything, to really have that R&R time, because, I think sometimes we focus so much on work that, you just have to relax as well. You have to recharge the batteries. You can't be on the clock 24/7. So anything for me, any kind of genre I'm open to, as long as it's, relaxing and it, brings a smile to my face. And then, just spending time with family. I think that balance out there, it's always good to focus on work, but making sure that you're balancing your priorities and making sure that, all your family and friends have equal amount of time with you as well. That's going to really make sure that you do excellent at your current job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably something I could definitely listen to. Too much work and too little play makes. I can't remember who it is, but somebody a dull boy, or whatever the saying goes from there. And interesting. Especially with healthcare services, with a lot of it being heavily government regulated, and changes and implementation from there, obviously an important element to keep in touch. But if anything, every industry has its regulators and processes that companies have to follow from a compliance perspective. So, Michael, if anybody wants to reach out to you post this podcast, how best do they get in touch, please?
Yeah, they can always email me at my personal email, mtangfw@yahoo.com. And, for any reason, or reach out to me on my LinkedIn profile, message there. Always willing to help out anyone in the healthcare industry if they have any questions, concerns, or anything they might have, any kind of special requests. So always willing to give back in the community anyway.
Perfect. We'll put all that in the show notes. So, Michael, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight into both healthcare, particularly behavioral health, M&A, and also all the other bits that you've left us with information-wise. So thank you very much. Left lots of value to PE professionals and portfolio executives alike.
God, no, thanks a lot. I appreciate the time and getting me on the podcast.
And as always, thank you very much for those listening. And of course, should you ever need support with your private equity professional hiring or portfolio executive hiring, please do reach out to me at Raw Selection. If you haven't done so, please do subscribe, and you'll be notified of the next podcast, which comes out every 2 weeks. But till the next time, keep smashing it, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you for listening to the Private Equity Podcast on www.raw-selection.com.